Now, only a detailed investigation can explain exactly what happened, but until then, it's the possibilities that are being speculated upon. This is the latest that we're getting from our sources associated with the investigations, and this information points to certain elements of pilot error, despite the fact, and we must add this caveat, both pilots, both the commander and the co-pilot, were amply experienced in not just in flying this particular aircraft, but also in landing in Mangalore. That combined between the two of them landed at least 80 times in the Mangalore airport. Sources say that the Serbian-born pilot Klusia and co-pilot HS Aluwalia overshot the touchdown zone by about 30-odd feet. This despite conditions such as visibility being a comfortable 6 kilometers. Wind speed was calm, there was no rain either. Till the last minute, the air traffic control received no distress call from either of the pilots. It seems they hardly got any time to react. By the time the pilots realized that the aircraft had overshot the touchdown zone, they tried to take off once again. But by then, one of the wingtips, the right wingtip, hit the runway, destabilized the plane. The pilots lost control of the aircraft. Though the runway 24 at Mangalore has a 90-meter spillover area or a safety area beyond the runway, the plane could not be stopped within that zone. It overshot, broke through the wall, and then fell into the deep gorge at the end of it. Alright, so what could have possibly triggered this massive tragedy? It's perhaps the worst air tragedy we've seen in at least a decade and a half here in India. Joining us here in our studios is Mark Martin. He's a famous civil aviation expert. Thanks very much, Mark, for joining us on the program. You've seen the preliminary reports that we're picking up. You've seen the data that's floating around. What do you think could have possibly gone wrong? Because the fact is, I mean, everybody seems to be suggesting it's pilot error, but the fact is that both pilots were amply experienced.
See, well, Zaka, if you actually look at if you go into the details, 8,000-foot runway, clear sky, your braking action, runway friction, everything was perfect for the aircraft to operate. The 737 NG is actually a next generation aircraft. You have a weather radar on board, you have wind shear detection, you have ground proximity warning, you have every single technology that enables a pilot to make a safe and a good decision. Now, even if you talk about a cockpit issue, if there's a pilot and a co-pilot flying together, CRM cuts down your cockpit pilot ego, brings a single decision out in the open. So there's absolutely no way that a bad decision could have taken place. Okay, so well,
what could have then possibly gone wrong?
See, well, I'll be honest with you, Zaka. At this stage, it's not right that you and I and everyone out there start to speculate. Okay, let that investigation come out, because I'll be very honest with you. You're talking about a next generation aircraft, 8,000-foot runway, perfect weather. There was nothing there that could actually hamper that aircraft. I mean, look at it this way: the Boeing 737 NG, the 800 NG, has a seating capacity of 189 passengers. Okay, he took off with 160 passengers, which means 30% less passenger, less weight. Okay, less cargo load. He came here with less fuel, because if he took off from Dubai with 10 tons, he would have eventually come here with about 2 tons, right? So the aircraft is lighter, your weather is perfect. Even if he had 6,000 feet of landing distance available, or LDA, he could have made a perfect safe landing. Okay. Now,
no, because there are concerns being raised by some people that the old runway at the Bangalore airport was just about 1,600 meters.
It was about 5,300 feet.
Yeah, about 1,600 meters. This one was about 2,200 meters.
That's correct.
There are concerns. Some people are saying that that the runway was short. Given the tabletop nature of the runway, it should have been slightly longer.
Well, you have more aggressive and more intense terrain runways in India. Okay, that runway is I've actually jump seated on a NG as well as on the 320 when I was advising the Civil Aviation Ministry. I've flown into Mangalore. Okay, it's a perfect runway. It's a beautiful runway to land in. The only issue is you got to turn back and come back to the terminal. Okay, now when you're coming in to land, even assuming he went beyond his TDZ or touchdown zone. Granted, now if it was a 1.8 G, he wanted to keep his G count at 1.8. Even if he overshot, you have enough advisory information in the aircraft which tells you have a recording which says 1,000 feet remaining, 500 feet remaining, 200 feet remaining, and a pilot can take a decision. Assuming he overshot, assuming he aggressively braked. Okay, now Boeing has 3 braking settings. You have auto brake 1, 2 and 3. A 3 auto setting, you can bring an aircraft down to an arrested stop, which means it's like a smack stop in the middle of the runway.
It just comes in bang.
It just comes in bang. Your passengers are going to be cursing you, but then the aircraft comes to a stop.
Is that so a concern that when pilots land, there's always a concern that you want it to be a soft landing, you want it to be a smooth landing, you don't want to inconvenience passengers, and therefore they tend to float and possibly overshoot the TDZ.
You tend to float, but if weather was calm, I'd like to relook at the weather data, because if you have, assuming his landing speed is 140 knots,
okay,
assuming he had a sudden gust of a 20 knot tailwind, okay, his landing speed goes up to 160. At 160, you're trying to stop an aircraft at 160 knots. You already crossed your threshold, you're coming into land, and then you're trying to stop your landing. So, like I said, there are 1,000 permutations and combinations to this. Okay.
And what do you make of the fact that after he landed and he realized, by the time both the pilots realized that they had overshot the TDZ, then they tried to sort of take off again.
Right.
That there is evidence of that, and then by that time they'd already lost control of the aircraft. Well, is that the right thing to do?
Well, typically what usually happens is if you overshoot, okay, you have enough safety procedures to tell you exactly what you need to do. One of it is a abort landing go around, where you just increase your power, you spool your engines up, it takes about 15 to 18 odd seconds, spool it up, you hit your V1, which is your V1 or V2, which is the two critical speeds, which is your takeoff speed or the speed you rotate. You get airborne, you can actually come back and attempt landing again.
Okay.
Now,
from the data you're picking up, do you think that's what he tried to do? Because there's one of the survivors who also says he heard a loud sound,
bang,
which could possibly be a tire burst.
It could be if you aggressively brake too hard. You can burst a tire. Okay, but then even if you burst a tire, what's going to happen is your airplane will just swing to one side. Okay, you have two MLGs and you have one in the front, so technically it's three, right? 3 landing points. If one bursts, your aircraft would swing. Now that didn't happen. Okay, so like I said, Zaka, I think it's best let that investigation come out, because on every single parameter you got an advanced aircraft, you got qualified pilots, and even if you go back to talking about their ability to fly, I mean, you're talking 10,000 flying hours. That guy has flown to more aggressive places than Mangalore in his own life. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And H.S. Ahluwalia was an ex-Air Force guy, plus he had about 4,000 hours of flying, so he's seen the worst. He's seen flying in more aggressive conditions. You put these guys to fly together, you can't bring ego issues, because you have
I don't think egos was a possibility, because both of them have flown together in the past. They've flown to Mangalore as well.
That airport several times,
In fact, the last time they flew into Mangalore was on the 17th of May.
Exactly. So I mean, it's too early. I think.
What do you think of what the Pilots Association is saying, that the expat pilots are overworked and so on?
Well, I wouldn't agree, because of any pilot, whether you're from India, Russia, Germany, Pakistan, or Kenya for that matter, every pilot has to fly with an FDTL limit. You can't exceed it.
Mark, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think we're getting a live feed of Praful Patel, the Civil Aviation Minister, speaking outside the Prime Minister's residence.